I call this meeting to order. This is the March 10th, 2021 regular session for the Schertz Planning and Zoning Commission. We've called the meeting to order. All the commissioners are present, so no alternates are required tonight. Item number 3, hearing of residents. Do we have any, Tiffany? Anybody sign up? No. Any emails to be read? No. All righty, so moving on to item number 4, the consent agenda. We have one item on there this evening, the minutes from the February 10th, 2021 regular meeting. Commissioners, do we need to pull that from consent to adjust, or to discuss it? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
A motion we accept the consent agenda as it is.
All righty, where'd that come from? Mr. Ray, okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Ray. Do I have a second?
I second.
I'm sorry, I missed that one too. Okay. I hate this arrangement, I really do. Okay. And a second from Commissioner Platt. There's no discussion on consent agenda items. I'll call for the vote.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 7 ayes, none opposed. That motion passes. Item number 5, public hearing. The Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing related to zone change requests and replats within this agenda. The public hearing will be open to receive a report from staff, the applicant, the adjoining property owners affected by the applicant's request, and any other interested persons. Upon completion, the public hearing will be closed. The Commission will discuss and consider the application and may request additional information from staff or the applicant if required. After deliberation, the Commission is asked to consider and act upon the following requests and make a recommendation to the City Council if necessary. So item 5A, ZC 2019-008, hold a public hearing, consider and make a recommendation on a request to rezone approximately 25 acres of land from General Business District and General Business District 2 to General Business District 2, generally located northeast of the intersection of FM 3009 and FM 78, also known as 200 FM 3009, also known as Guadalupe County, property identification numbers 153960, 164035, 67453, City of Schertz, Guadalupe County, Texas. Ms. Grobe?
Good evening, Commissioners. So this zone change request is for approximately 25 acres. Emily Delgado, Senior Planner. So the subject property here is outlined in green. To get your bearings, this is FM 3009 and FM 78. And then once again, the subject property outlined in green. The front, more than half is currently developed as the lockaway storage. At that intersection, you can see these are the existing storage buildings, and then there is open RV boat storage behind those. Public hearing notices were mailed out on February 24th, 19 in total to the property owners within 200 feet. At this time, we have not received any public hearing responses to the zone change application. So this is the current zoning map, the subject property outlined in red, and then I have the kind of 3 split zonings identified by the pink, and I'm going to kind of go into further detail on each portion. So this front portion is 7.04 acres, currently zoned general business. It's developed as that mini warehouse public storage, which in the general business zoning is considered a non-conforming land use. The next portion here, 7.55 acres, currently zoned general business 2. That zoning was established in 2013. Along with that zoning, there was a specific use permit to allow for mini warehouse public storage approved at that time. However, that did have a conditional 5 years and has since expired. So since it is currently used as public storage in the general business 2 zoning without an active SUP, it's also considered non-conforming. Excuse me. The back portion, this here, is 10.14 acres, currently zoned general business, and is currently undeveloped. And the applicant property owner is desiring to do an expansion on that portion. I ideally to do mini warehouse public storage, so they are requesting the general business 2 for the entire property. And then immediately following this zone change, they are requesting a specific use permit for the entire property as well. So this is the zoning exhibit slide. Again, you can kind of see this is that tract 1, that's general business. This is the general business 2 portion, and then general business back here as well. One thing I did want to note on this zoning exhibit is they are showing the approximate location of the 3009 expansion here. And just as a reminder, since this is just the zoning and then following up with a specific use permit, it does not dedicate the right-of-way. That would be done through a replat at a later date. But they're at least showing where that potentially could be. So the future land use plan through the comprehensive land use plan does designate this property as parks and open space, which is defined to be public parks, outdoor recreation areas, golf courses. So you can see all of this frontage along 3009 and this whole area, that's what it was designated at that time. However, the proposed rezoning of general business 2, it is not inconsistent with that goal. However, from the Google Earth imagery, this property has been used as mini warehouse public storage since at least 2002. If you go off the county records, the buildings were built in around 95. So this existing land use was there when that comp plan was done, so it's kind of never really been in conformance. Although the requested zoning of general business 2 is not consistent with the current designation, it is consistent with the existing business and the proposed business expansion, and should have a minimal impact on the surrounding properties and public infrastructure since the majority is undeveloped, or there is the portion that was the previous landfill, and then obviously with 3009, the railroad and 78. In addition, the requested zoning will make the zoning for the entire property consistent, rather than having this kind of weird split zoning with the middle being general business 2 and the rear and front being general business. As I had mentioned before, the property's been utilized for mini warehouse public storage since at least 2002, so there shouldn't be a big impact with zoning the entire property that general business 2. The requested zone change and the associated specific use permit, if approved, would bring the property into a legal conforming land use status and would allow the business to do the expansion that they desire. With that, staff is making a recommendation of approval for the entire 25 acres to be zone changed to general business 2. And we do have representatives from the engineering firm, the property owner. They're kind of all situated in the back if there's any questions for them after the public hearing.
All right, thank you. Would the applicant like to address the commission at this time? You're welcome to. You don't have to. If you would, please, when you come up, it's fine, come on up, but just please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Jerry Arredondo, and my address is 2902 Hillcrest in San Antonio. And I have had both my vaccines, so I took off my mask a little bit, just for the record. But yes, and we're working with the storage company, and like it was said earlier by Emily, is that this is consistent with what has been there for a long time, and this will bring everything into compliance, if you will, and have really no impact on the area, but will allow us to be able to expand into the what is now the 25 acres in total, and the portions that we talked about, and she said with the SUP and the zoning, which brings consistency. We'd appreciate your approval of our request.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Don Clausen.
And you can take your mask off at the mic if you want to, or leave it on.
Thank you very much. My name is Don Clausen, and my address is 100 North Castano, San Antonio. I reside in California and in San Antonio, Texas. I first wanted to really just address the commissioners and thank you all, and thank the city of Schertz for all the work that they've done in allowing us to get this far along the process. We really do want to provide something that is good for the community, and that would, something that you also would be proud of. We think that there's the current plan that is outlaid will not only spruce up what's been there since 1995. We'll put it into the right landscaping, and I think that it's something that hopefully the community needs. So we do want to provide a service. And I just wanted a chance to introduce myself and to thank you.
You're welcome, sir, and thank you. At this time, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone in the audience wishing to address the commission about this is welcome to step forward to the microphone. Don't all rush at once. All right. No one? One more time? All right, public hearing is closed. Commissioners, comments, questions?
I have a question. How do we get in the position where they had the storage that wasn't meeting our requirement?
In terms of the comp plan, or, so it's my understanding when the future land use plan map was done, we didn't necessarily look at each individual property and the current development on that property. So that's most likely why. So we have this in several areas of the city that it's been developed as, residential for a really long time, and the comp plan still had it as commercial or manufacturing. I guess it was a few years back we even brought in a small comp plan revision to address some of these items. So that when the comp plan was originally done, we just didn't go to that micro level of looking at each individual property.
Well, in the future, are we going to try to clear some of this stuff up?
So I would like to think that with the comp plan amendment that's going to be moving forward is, obviously we're not going to say homestead is going to be commercial, right? We're going to, the big subdivisions that we know about, we're going to make sure that those are identified as residential, that kind of thing.
Yes, as Emily noted at the beginning, the original storage buildings up front there on 3009 have been there. 95 is plus or minus, been there quite a while. And so a lot of the planning and the zoning and the things that you see in place today are relatively recent compared to 1995. So, anybody else?
Just a question on what happened the last time this came up on the paving. Are they going to have to pave this whole area, or will they be permitted to have some kind of a pervious cover?
So the expansion that we'll talk about with the SUP is proposed to be all asphalt everywhere that new expansion is going to be.
Okay, I remember when we, not we, because I wasn't up here at the time, but I remember when the city went through the whole SUP process and allowed the tenant to move the RV storage from right there all along 3009 to move it around back where it is today. I remember all that. The one question that popped into my mind as I read through this was if we put an expiration date on the SUP and it expired and the use continued, I mean, what are the city rules or procedures about? We give you a time limit and you don't make it. What do we do then?
So technically, when I read through the minutes, and just so everybody's kind of clear, that 5-year was for the SUP. The zone change right was forever. The 5-year expiration was, one, to make sure that in the 5 years they moved that storage. Let me go back to the aerial, that might help. At the time, if you picture kind of the RV boat storage was all done here. In the 5 years, they were required to move it back here. After the 5-year term, the SUP expired. That's just like in anywhere else where the business is there and it doesn't comply with the zoning. It's considered a non-conforming use. So we have that whole Article 7 that talks about what they can and can't do, one of those being an expansion. They could not come in and do an expansion even though they had that previous SUP until they applied for a new SUP. So that was brought up in the minutes of the P&Z meeting,
Okay.
kind of what happens after that. And it was stated that after that 5 years, they could come in and request another expansion, but they'd have to go through that SUP process again.
And I'm sorry, I looked at all this earlier, Emily, and I've already forgotten. This particular use, even in a GB2, requires an SUP.
Yes, sir.
So even though the property where the RVs are being stored is zone GB2, he should have come in and asked for another SUP in order to continue that use.
Not necessarily. So we have businesses all over the city that are in a zoning district that currently wouldn't allow a new business. So they're just considered non-conforming, and they'd have to comply with that 7.
Okay, a little philosophy here is typically I would anticipate a non-conforming use when that use is in existence when we zone it, and it's non-conforming. But in this case, we intentionally gave this, business an SUP. We allowed them to create the non-conforming use, and that's something, I don't know how we're going to handle it, but it might be something we want to think about, okay?
And I would say the SUPs, so like on the next case, right? Keep everybody just in mind, this is just for the GB2 zoning request. We typically don't do that SUP expiration anymore. You have those 2 typical SUP expirations. They got to pull a building permit, get a building permit issued in a year, and the business operations have to start in 2 years. But
Okay.
that SUP runs with the property, where we're not causing this.
And that's probably the better way to do it. The comprehensive land use plan where you showed us it's all green, that's parks and open space. This question really has nothing to do with the applicant, but I noticed they're doing something north of that. They've got silt fences up, there's heavy equipment operating. Do you have any idea what's being done there?
So y'all may remember it's been quite a while. We got a plat that came through you guys, the Blackburn subdivision.
Yes.
For a Caldwell Banker building.
Okay.
So they're doing the infrastructure for that. So that plat hasn't been recorded yet. They got to do all the infrastructure first. But
Well, I think that's good information because it just further shows that, we wanted, the comp plan shows one thing and the real world is something different. So so it does have some bearing on this. I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place, okay? Because I'll be very honest with you, I'm not real thrilled with rezoning the corner. The back properties that don't front 3009, yeah. I'm not real thrilled with zoning that corner GB2. I went through the list and, there are not many things that I would object to on that corner, but there are 2 or 3. Is there any other way, okay, to do this other than zoning the whole property GB2?
so the mini warehouse public storage, non-conforming in general business, they can't even request an SUP to allow it in the general business. So basically, forever and always, that current storage business that's been there for so long would be considered non-conforming. So that's why the applicant originally chose to come in and
Okay.
rezone the whole thing and do the SUP for the whole thing. So,
Yeah.
their business would be considered conforming at that point.
Sure. Well, the rock is not wanting to rezone that corner. The hard place is doing right by the long, they've been there almost as long as I've been in the city, okay? I only have them beat for it by a few years. And so that's the hard place, is doing doing right by the landowner. So, and again, going through the list, and that might have been the one, I don't know if the other commissioners would have found it of value, but in the past, we've seen you've thrown a list up there and says, here's everything, and then you highlight the ones that would be allowed in GB2 that aren't allowed. And again, I only found a couple, and, outdoor flea market being one, and I think outdoor stable, and then what was the third one I didn't care much about was the recycling collection point. Okay, but other than that, they're all pretty. They all fit in the area. Even if something were to go with, light manufacturing or something, there's some use in there for that. But looking ahead, when we get to the SUP, you know, the landowner is looking to put us, he's going to make a significant investment in this piece of property back there. So I don't imagine anybody's going to be tearing anything down to put in an outdoor flea market, at least not in the foreseeable future. So, all righty. That said, again, I think it's important to, you know, these people have been there a long time. And I think they're doing the right thing, and we should do, you know, we should try to do right by them. Commissioners, anything else? Anybody else have questions?
Do we need to make any kind of a thing where they can't build in that middle section?
Well, I think that's more, I think that question, Mr. Commissioner Greenwald, I'm sorry, is probably more applicable to the SUP when we get to that.
Okay.
That's all right with you.
Sure.
Commissioners, if there's no further discussion, we're looking here for a motion to recommend, make a recommendation to council to approve or deny this zoning change request. And again, I think if you look at the end of staff's memo, they have two conditions. So they are recommending approval with these two conditions.
For so the conditions are only.
Well, that's for the SUP. Okay,
Just the
I'm
zone
sorry.
change, no conditions on this one.
I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead again. You know, it's kind of hard because it's all really one thing, but, okay, so we're just looking for a straight-out recommendation one way or the other to City Council.
I move that we make a recommendation to the council to approve CZ 2019-008.
Second.
Where was that? Ricky? Okay. All right, I have a motion to recommend approval to City Council from Commissioner Ray and a second from Commissioner Haynes. Any further discussion? Call the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. All right, 7 ayes, none opposed. That motion to recommend approval passes. Item 5A, I'm sorry, 5B. Another public hearing for SUP 2020-002. Hold a public hearing, consider and make a recommendation on a request for a specific use permit to allow mini warehouse / public storage on approximately 25 acres of land generally located northeast of the intersection of FM 3009 and FM 78. Also known as 200 FM 3009, also known as Guadalupe County Property Identification Numbers 153960, 164035, and 67453, City of Schertz, Guadalupe County, Texas.
All right, so I think at this point we're all pretty familiar with the property that we're looking at, but just again, 300978, subject property outlined in green, and then the existing walkaway storage shown there. 19 public hearing notices were sent on February 24th for the specific use permit to those same property owners that received the zone change, all the property owners within 200 feet. We did receive one response outlined by the yellow star that was neutral to the SUP request. So current zoning, again, we have the general business up front, general business 2 in the middle, and then general business again in the back where the proposed expansion would be. And again, all of this would technically be considered non-conforming in the current zoning, and because they don't have an active SUP. The reason for the SUP, even with the recommendation of approval for the zone change, general business 2 for mini warehouse public storage does require a specific use permit. So this is that SUP exhibit. It looks very similar to the zoning exhibit. Again, they are showing that proposed, future 3009 extension. At this point, it would be elevated, as we've kind of previously talked about, but it would be elevated over this property, which we have had communication with the owner about it being elevated. ideally, we would work with TxDOT and the plans, the engineers with the plans, and the elevated section here would be over that middle section, which is the general kind of outdoor storage, no buildings, no structures, with the hopes that when that flyover does happen, we could do some sort of lease agreement with the property owner to allow them to continue to use underneath the 3009 flyover. But with the replat, they would be required to dedicate that right away. Okay, so getting into the site plan, this has gone through the site plan certification process. It was reviewed by Engineering, Public Works, Planning, and Fire, found to be with no objections. Specifically, we really focused on the back portion where the expansion is. There's no proposed changes to the existing buildings or that existing general public storage that's outdoor. So that's that overall site plan exhibit. Here it is zoomed into the expansion. There is a total of 2 proposed buildings for a total of 81,079 square feet of climate-controlled office, indoor, mini warehouse public storage, which you can see in these 2 buildings here. There is an additional outdoor public storage for RV and boat storage here, and then an additional 28 parking spaces for the 2 structures that are located here, here, and here that all do meet the 10 by 20 requirement. This is kind of top down looking at the 2 buildings. They do comply with all architectural feature requirements. So just as a reminder, we can't regulate building materials, but they do comply with all the vertical and horizontal articulations. This is what the 2 buildings would look like. This is the overall landscape plan, and again, just focusing on that portion that they're doing the expansion on. A couple things I want to highlight. 28.9% of the site will be landscaped, and there's going to be a total of 65 trees provided, 54 of which will be new and 11 that are existing. Another key thing, the 54 new trees that they're proposing are to be 3-inch DBH, which is greater than the 2.5 minimum, so they have chosen to upsize the trees that they're proposing. They are meeting the tree requirement at the terminus of all rows of parking, so you can see again that row of parking, the 2 trees, the trees here, the trees here. And then they are proposing to do a trees and shrub row screening along the Union Pacific right-of-way, which immediately backs up to the 78 right-of-way for all of the vehicular use and RV storage here. And then it does continue onto this property line as well. This is the overall tree preservation plan. As I mentioned, they do have those 11 existing trees. They are proposing to save all 11 of them, so it does exceed our minimum preservation of 25%. So no tree mitigation fee, since they're saving all of them. And then this is where those proposed trees are located. So this is the expansion area. And they have this back portion here that they're leaving undisturbed, where those trees are being saved. The proposed specific use permit and associated site plan, as I had mentioned, have been reviewed by Engineering, Public Works, Fire, and Planning with no objections. The majority of the property currently exists as that operational lock-away storage business, which is mini warehouse and public storage. And as I mentioned on the zone change, if you go with Google Earth since 2002, if you go from county records since 1995, by requesting the specific use permit for the entire 25 acres, rather than just the back 10.14 acres, which really encompasses that expansion area, will bring the entire property into conformance and remove the non-conforming land use status that is currently on the property. So staff is making a recommendation of the proposed specific use permit for the full 25 acres to allow mini warehouse public storage. And then these are the 2 standard SUP conditions. A building permit is approved within 1 year of the adoption of the SUP, and the use begins operation within 2 years of the issuance of the necessary building permits. And then just keep in mind that since this is an existing business, these 2 conditions would really apply to those back 2 buildings in that expansion area. So they would need a building permit for those back 2 buildings, or at least one of those back 2 buildings within a year. And then those would need to be in operation within 2. And as you guys know, applicant is still here if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Gentlemen, anything you want to say about this one? Again, it's not required. All right, open the public hearing. Anyone else that would like to address the commission, please step forward. Nobody. I like these. These are easy. One more time. Anybody want to address the commission on this topic? One more time. Public hearing is closed. Commissioners.
I have one quick question. Now that we know that the entire area back in the back where the new construction is going to be, where the storage buildings are going to be built, that's going to be asphalt. With all that said, will that meet the 80% impervious covering maximum for that property?
Yes, so they are, so the 28.9% of the site's going to be landscaped, so it's under the 80% impervious limitation.
Thank you.
Do we have any, once we move the RV storage from beside the warehouses or beside the storage buildings to the back, we left that land open, which is to the north or left of, yes. Do we have, we asked the question then, what was going to happen to that land? Do we have any answers as to what's going to happen to that land?
I'll look to the back, but based on the conversation from just before the meeting, I don't think they have a plan at this point. Their goal is just to do the expansion to the rear. I don't believe they have any sort of expansion planned or ideas for that portion up front. But it is outside of the subject property. It's not within the 25 acres for the SUP, and it wasn't in the 25 acres for the zone change either.
Will we see this again at any point in time?
So this back portion is unplatted, so they will have to come in for a replat. So you'll see the replat, but you won't see the site plan again.
I get my only concern about this. I can't think of a better use for this piece of property. But my only concern is if they have to pave all this, the runoff into the creek. How are we going to stop? And then did engineering and our water people look at the possibility of runoff of gasoline, oil, diesel, wastewater, gray water into the Dietz Creek and eventually into Cibolo Creek?
So they did review the stormwater management plan. Thankfully, we actually have John Nowak from our engineering department here today. I don't know, John, did y'all by chance review anything like that? You want to come up?
And I would also say I believe our UDC is weak when it comes to discussion on off-street parking, because I wouldn't consider this off-street parking. I would consider this storage, and I would consider it in another category, and I would prefer to have this area not paved so that it would remain permeable, so it would trap all that potential pollution. But John, I'm interested in to hear what you have to say.
We did consider it a little bit. The conditions, while there is potentially, you know, it's a large sea of asphalt, basically a large parking lot. It's no different than other parts of the community. It does go on to kind of a grassy area or an area that has some vegetation right along the edge of it that helps clean up the water before it gets into the channel. One of the exhibits that Emily showed, for example, you know, they've got the row of shrubs and trees along there, so there is a little bit of a green belt there. All of that kind of factored into our decision. We did review the stormwater management plan and found it to be acceptable and in compliance with our rules, and similar to other properties in close proximity to a large drainage feature like this. So it is one thing that, you know, if it's something that we want to consider in the future to tighten up our regulations, we're certainly willing to talk about it, but in terms of this meeting everything, it does. To your other point of leaving it some type of permeable surface, if they were to put base down and compact it and park on it, which is what at a minimum most people would want to do rather than park in dirt, mud, grass, that creates a whole other host of issues. Compacted base material is actually considered an impermeable surface. it does start, water will start trickling down through it, but only after it gets saturated. When the rain first hits it, it's going to shed water similar to asphalt or concrete will. And so we treat that in terms of stormwater calculations, stormwater analysis. If somebody's coming in with it or has a large compacted base area, we treat it the same as though it's paved or concrete in terms of drainage calculation for that reason.
How about the middle section? Is that going to be paved as well? I'm not sure if it is now, but
I believe it is, but I'm gonna, is the middle section? Oh.
The overall plan, we would certainly do it that way. And if we felt better about us paving it, we would do that. So it currently is not.
Okay, if I may, just for the record, because I don't know how well the audio picked all that up, the question was asked as if the existing RV storage, the center area of this property, is paved or was going to be paved, and the applicant's answer was it's not currently paved. They would consider it if the city required it, but right now it's not paved. Is that a good summary for the record? Thank you. Commissioner?
so from an engineering standpoint, an asphalt paved area is similar to, if not the same, as a hard packed gravel or crushed granite or something else?
In terms of water control and runoff, yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
If I could share a personal observation, I keep a motorhome storage lot over in Cibolo, and it's all, I think, what we call caliche around here. As an owner, I would much rather park on pavement, but I will tell you, when we get a good rain, you can come over my space and you can see where the water runs past my motorhome and into the field adjacent. So as the engineer was pointed out, you do get rid of the caliche, or the road base is so hard packed it's almost like concrete. So. Anything else, commissioners? And I think you answered my question, Emily. We still have a plat to do, and that's where you'll address the 3009 issue, the future of that. Okay, yes. Thank you.
So any right-of-way would be dedicated with the actual replat. It's not done here, but they are showing it on their exhibits to acknowledge that it's there. They are aware about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, commissioners, if we have no further questions or discussion, once again, this is a recommendation to City Council to either approve or deny this specific use permit application.
A motion to approve SUP 2020-002 as presented.
Okay, that was Commissioner Platt? Yes? Okay. And I'm sorry, that was to approve?
Yes, sir.
With the conditions?
As presented by.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion to recommend approval with the two conditions specified by staff. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Hey, and getting behind on my notes here. And a second from Commissioner Ray. Do we have any further discussion? All right, I'll call the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. So I'm pretty sure I heard 7 ayes and none opposed. So the motion to recommend approval to City Council is approved. All right, moving on to item number 6, items for individual consideration. You're more than welcome. All right, so 6A, WA 2021-001, consider and act upon a request for approval of a waiver request regarding on-site sewage facilities for the preliminary plat of 9.36 acres on, is it Kohler Road?
Kaler.
Kaler Road, okay. Not a native Texan, so I apologize. 9.36 acres on Kaler Road, a roughly 9.36 acre tract of land generally located approximately 3,200 feet from the intersection of Green Valley Road and Kaler Road. Mike is yours.
Good evening, Commission. Megan Harrison, planner for the City of Schertz. This is a waiver to the UDC Section 21.15.3.b, wastewater systems to install privately owned on-site sewage facilities, and this is associated with the preliminary plat that will be seen here in just a little bit. So just to provide your bearings, this is Kaler Road, and the subject property is outlined in the green. Also, just to give a more broad aerial of the property, so this property is located in the Schertz ETJ, and so here is Green Valley. Also, just for reference, this is Parklands. And then Kaler Road right here, and that subject property with the yellow star. So this is just the preliminary plat that we will see later on this evening that we will vote on, but this is just showing that the property is going to be subdivided into the two tracts, tract 1 being 6.01 acres and tract 3 being 3.35 acres. So the applicant is proposing to subdivide the subject property into the two single-family tracts. Again, mentioning that tract 1 is the 6.01 acres and tract 2 the 3.35 acres. The applicant is seeking approval of the waiver to UDC Section 2115.3.b, which is the wastewater systems, in order to not connect to a public sanitary sewer system, which would allow them to install a privately owned on-site sewage facility, the OSSF, on each of the proposed lots. There is already an existing OSSF on the property for tract 2, which is at 3.35 acres. The subject property is outside the city limits and is located in the extraterritorial jurisdiction. So in accordance with the UDC Section 15, the easements and utilities, 2115.3.b, the wastewater system, all lots, tracts, and parcels that are which the development is proposed shall be connected to a public wastewater system. Also, the UDC Section 2112.2.d requires that all land subdivided or platted shall comply in full with the requirements of this UDC. The engineering department, in reviewing the waiver request, provided that the department is in support of granting the waiver and notes that it is consistent with the similar waivers that have previously been granted. Additionally, engineering stated that they verified that the proposed preliminary plat associated with this waiver request is laid out in a manner to provide for future connection of public sanitary sewer system in the future. Additionally, granting this waiver will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare, or be injurious to the other properties in the area. If approved, any new on-site sewage facilities needed to serve the proposed preliminary plat will be reviewed and permitted through Guadalupe County. So this is just for reference to show y'all the memo that was provided by our engineering department, John Nowak, who is present if there are specific questions. But this is just stating that they did review it and that they did approve the, recommending to approve it. So staff is making the recommendation approval of the waiver based on there not being any public sanitary sewer facilities existing in the proposed area of the subdivision. Additionally, just wanted to say that the granting this waiver will not be detrimental to public health, safety, or welfare, or be injurious to the other properties in the area. We also have the engineer who's also for the project here as well, if there are also specific questions.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, questions, discussions?
Well, this is more a formality issue to me. But in the past, when we had these requests for waivers, there also was a letter that showed us how far the closest public connection was. And, you know, whether that's a quarter mile, half mile, 3/4 mile, didn't matter. And it showed us where that connection was, so we could understand the distance that these people were going to have to lay pipe if the city did not provide a waiver. We've already apparently provided a waiver on one tract of this land. Is that a correct statement?
No, we have not. It was already an existing OSF. So that tract already had the on-site sewage facility.
Who provided the OSF on that tract of land?
Guadalupe County would be who they would go through to do the permitting for the ETJ. But just for reference, Commissioner Evans, this is Parklands up here. The closest on-site for public sanitary sewer would be Parklands. So it's roughly about a mile away for this property.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I agree with Commissioner Evans. I think this is more a formality than anything else. But again, I think it would be helpful. It's just one more, evidence is the wrong word, but having that, if nothing else, just a map
More information.
that gives us an idea of how, you know, it just kind of strengthens the case.
Yes, sir.
And again, you know, the annexation up here in this area is relatively new, so I'm sure the existing OSSF and the homestead here was well outside our ETJ when all this was done. So again, I'm surprised that they're in the ETJ, that they even have to ask for this. I guess they're subject to our subdivision rules.
So because we are the plating authority for Guadalupe County,
oh, okay.
that is
okay.
the purpose of this. Yes, sir.
Gotcha. All right. Commissioners, anything else? Okay, this is one that we can approve or deny. This is our decision tonight. So if anyone would like to make a motion one way or the other.
I move that that we approve the WA 2021-001 as written and submitted.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Haynes. That was a second? Okay. And a second from Commissioner Broad. Any further discussion, questions? Last chance. Call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Hearing 7 ayes and none opposed. Motion to approve passes. Okay, 6B. WA 2021-002, consider and act upon a request for approval of a waiver regarding rough proportionality in relation to the construction of the street improvements adjacent to the proposed preliminary plat of the 9.36 acres on Kaler. Is it Kaler? Okay. Kaler Road, and approximately 9.36 acre tract of land generally located 3,200 feet from the intersection of Green Valley Road and Kaler Road. Megan?
And so this is a waiver for UDC section 2114-1K for the half streets and adjacent streets associated with the preliminary plat that we will see. Again, just for reference, this is the subject property outlined in green, and then Kaler Road. As mentioned previously, the subject property with the gold star, Kaler Road, Green Valley. It is located in the ETJ. So the applicant is proposing to subdivide subject property into the 2 tracts, as mentioned previously. With the subdivision being outside the city limits, the applicant is seeking approval to the requirement in UDC section 21.14.1.k to improve substandard roadways adjacent to proposed subdivision plats. In accordance with the UDC section, half-streets or adjacent streets requires that no new half-streets shall be platted that do not conform to the master thoroughfare plan and the comprehensive land plan. Where the proposed subdivision abuts upon an existing street or half-street not conforming to the comprehensive land plan requirements or the requirements of this UDC, the subdivider shall be required to dedicate any additional right-of-way to meet the street width required. The proposed 9.36 acres on Kaler Road subdivision would be required to reconstruct 1/2 of Kaler Road along their frontage, as the current roadway does not meet the standards identified in the Master Thoroughfare Plan and Comprehensive Land Use Plan. However, the construction of such street improvements must also be roughly proportional as per state law. The Master Thoroughfare Plan has defined the process for calculating rough proportionality of the street improvements. The engineering staff did perform the rough proportionality calculations and determined that requiring the construction of the street improvements would not be roughly proportional to the proposed subdivision impact to the transportation system. Therefore, the engineering staff determined that in order to comply with the state law requirements, the construction of the street improvements should not be required for the proposed subdivision. Now, the proposed plat is dedicating 10 feet of right-of-way along the property frontage to provide for future street improvements to Kaler Road. Kaler Road, according to our Master Thoroughfare Plan, is a 70-foot residential planned collector. So in order to not require the construction of these improvements, a waiver from the requirement of the UDC section 21.14.1.k must be granted, as staff cannot administratively waive the construction of the street improvements. This is just for reference. This is the Master Thoroughfare Plan. It is identified as a new street, but it is a residential planned collector, 70-foot right-of-way. Again, this is just the memo as referenced at the engineering department. John Nowak, who is present from our engineering department, did conduct the rough proportionality for this property and did identify that it is not proportional. The staff recommendation, based on the engineering department review of the rough proportionality calculations, which determined that requiring the applicant to construct the street improvements would not be roughly proportional to the proposed subdivision's impact to the transportation system. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the waiver to not construct adjacent streets improvements for the proposed 9.36 acres on Kaler Road subdivision. Now, the proposed plat is dedicating the 10 feet of right-of-way along the property frontage to provide for future street improvements to Kaler Road.
All right, thank you. Commissioners?
How much right-of-way has Kohler Road got right now? Does anybody know?
50 feet, sir.
50? Okay, thank you.
I think this is more than fair dedication for the future. We have no idea when the road's going to be improved. And so 10-foot right-of-way dedication is more than fair enough for this.
Anyone else? Once again, I appreciate that the engineer, it's been a long time since I've heard rough proportionality. And typically those were accompanied by some kind of a sheet that showed the numbers. Okay. Again, this is a relatively small, it's just a, a landowner. I don't know if he's subdividing for family or what they're doing, but typically, this is not a big, we don't need to put a big burden on them. Does that also waive, what's the word I'm looking for? roadway impact fees? No? So are they subject to those? You can just shake your head, Brian.
Right. So roadway impact fees only apply in the city limits.
Okay.
So they're not subject because they're not in the city limits.
Okay, thank you, sir. And again, this is within our approval authority, that we're not recommending this is ours to deal with, okay. So if we have no further questions or discussion, we'll entertain a motion to either approve or deny WA 2021-002.
A motion to approve WA 2021-002 as presented by staff.
I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Platt. Do I have a second? Second. And a second from Commissioner Haynes. Any further questions or discussion? There being none, I'll call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. 7 ayes, none opposed. That motion to approve passes. Item C. PC 2021-006, consider and act upon a request for approval of a preliminary plat of the 9.36 acres on Kaler Road, an approximately 9.36 acre tract of land generally located 3,200 feet south of the intersection of Green Valley Road and Kaler Road, located in Schertz extraterritorial jurisdiction, Guadalupe County, Texas. Megan.
Again, 9.36 acres on Kaler Road for the preliminary plat. We've seen this, but this is the subject property outlined in green. And then again, identified with that gold star. It is located in the ETJ. So this is the preliminary plat. It is going to be subdivided into 2 tracts. First tract being this larger one, the 6.01 acres, and then the tract 2 with it being the 3.35 acres. The property will have access on both of the lots will have access onto Kaler Road. They did provide a tree affidavit, but will not be required. They are not subject to the tree mitigation just due to them being outside in the ETJ. The property will be serviced for water by Green Valley Special Utility District, and then with the approval of the sewer waiver, they will have an on-site sewage facility, which will have to go through permitting for Guadalupe County. Based on the transportation, the waiver for the roadway, they will be dedicating that 10 feet of right-of-way on their property along the whole entire frontage. And all departments have reviewed this preliminary plat and have had no comments or no objection for this preliminary plat. So staff is recommending approval of the preliminary plat as submitted.
Thank you, Megan. Commissioners, questions, discussion? I have to ask one question. And again, I haven't seen one of these in a long time, but we've talked before about flag lots. Okay, are there any concerns here at all with this being what I think is a flag lot from staff?
So since it's in the ETJ, right, it doesn't have zoning, so we cannot control the layout of the lots, the size of the lots, the frontage, any of that. So even though we're the platting authority through Guadalupe County, the state still says there's only certain things we can regulate, and lot width, depth, that's not one of them.
All right, thank you, Emily. All right, commissioners, once again, this is ours to approve or deny. If I have no other questions or discussion, we'll certainly take a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve PC 2021-006 for the preliminary plat on Kaler Road as presented.
I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Broad. Do I have a second? And a second from Commissioner Ray. Any further questions or discussion? Call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Hearing 7 ayes and none opposed, that motion passes. Wish it wasn't so hard for the small landowners to get. This is quite a process for them to go through. Okay, so that takes care of item 6. Item 7, requests and announcements. Request by commissioners to place items on a future planning and zoning agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I had a request to place on a future agenda, handout I provided to staff and the rest of the board that would allow us to explore feasibility and authority to review restrictive covenants of properties during the master plan submittal process.
Okay. I think if I can summarize what we're looking for here, the topic is homeowners associations, and so maybe what we're looking for is a briefing on what we can and can't do and that kind of thing. That sufficient? Thank you, sir. Anything else? Anybody else? All right. Announcements by commissioners. Anyone have anything for the group? All right, moving on to item C, announcements by city staff.
Good evening again. So one quick announcement, but a pretty exciting announcement. I'd like to introduce James May, goes by Jimmy. He's our newest planner. He started on March 1st. He comes to us with a degree from Texas State in planning, some AutoCAD experience, and we are just super excited to have him on board. So at this point, with Nick being promoted up to the senior planner over the long-range planning, we're just thrilled to have Jimmy on board to help with the workload. Jimmy, do you want to say anything?
Hey guys, nice to meet you. I'm really just hoping I can help as much as I can. Well, I'm gonna figure it out so far. I'll keep going.
Texas State, thank you. Yeah, it's refreshing not to have another Aggie standing there. So
that makes 4.
Yes, so we have the 4. So the 2 senior planner positions and the 2 planner 1 positions now, which is nice.
And you know the only other James May I know. You ever watch that British motor? Yeah.
Yeah, I know,
Okay.
I know what you're talking about.
Well, welcome aboard. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
And then commissioners, did you want to talk about any of these, or they've shown you the city council results of actions we've sent forward?
So I'm happy to go through them if you want. We've, based on a request from P&Z, we started adding them, just giving an update on when things went through council. The only other thing I wanted to mention was thank you to the commissioners that attended the charm workshop. I thought it was pretty informative. Some good information about developing in the floodplain, that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, having it on Zoom was a little different than us getting to do it hands-on, but I did appreciate those of you that attended. That's it.
All
Hopefully
right.
something will come out of it. Hopefully something will come out of the conference that we all talked about.
I just want to also say I'm still not getting those emails. I didn't get any links to it at all.
We'll see. See what we can do. We'll talk after this.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Commissioners, there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.